Hi, so welcome to our first flipped learning session on the CIR process, Collaborative Instructional Review. And today I'm going to be talking to you about Rigor, which is the first component in our CIR process. Quick review. So again, CIR is Collaborative Instructional Review. Remember, this is just a snapshot of instruction in our school and in your classroom, and we're focusing on the lens of the Rigor Relevance Framework. So Rigor, Relevance, and Learner Engagement. We'll be going through 4 different walkthroughs this school year. So one for each of those frameworks, and then one that combines all 3. The goal of CIR is to ultimately improve student achievement and instructional effectiveness. It's really about targeting to make sure that we have the right tool, the right learning for the students at that time, and being intentional about our learning targets. We also want to improve professional dialogue. So for our teachers who are being observed, as well as the teachers who are doing the observing, really raising the bar on our ability to talk to each other about rigor, relevance, and learner engagement to improve our instruction and our student learning. Remember that when we come in to do a classroom visit, our goal is to be watching the students 80% of the time. We're really only watching the teacher 20% of the time, because the goal, again, ultimately is to increase student achievement. So it's a 3-phase process. Again, preparing for rigorous instruction. That's through a lesson planning and coaching session with the academic coach. We will then come in for classroom visits, and after the visit that same day, we will have a sort of a fishbowl dialogue conversation just to talk about the instruction that was observed and if the lesson went the way that you had intended. Now, before we get into rigor, I want to talk about relationships, because ultimately, for all 3 categories, rigor, relevance, and learner engagement, we can't achieve high levels, 3s and 4s on those rubrics without having strong relationships. John Hattie said, "It is teachers who have created positive teacher-student relationships that are more likely to have the above-average effects on student achievement." So it's absolutely imperative that no matter what level of rigor, relevance, or learner engagement we're looking at, that relationship piece in your classroom is in place. Some tools, things to think about. You want to make sure you've taken some time to build common ground with your students. Take the time to create a culture of respect and appreciation for diversity. We want to use structures during instruction that provide opportunities for students to feel a sense of belonging, and greet your students at the door every day. Now, greeting your students at the door every day is not just good for monitoring the pods and making sure that kids move from class to class. Research has shown that when teachers greet students at the door, on-task behavior during the first 10 minutes of class increases from 45% to 75%. So greeting your students at the door not only creates that positive environment, but it actually gets your students more prepared for the learning that they are going to be doing in your classroom. If you want to read more about how to build relationships, you can scan the QR code or visit the website that is listed below. All right, let's talk about rigor. So why do we start with rigor? You might have seen this sentence before. This is the Greiny-Groller's thinking test. So take a second, read that sentence to yourself. Okay, it's a whole bunch of nonsense words. Words that we haven't ever heard before, and words that really don't mean anything. However, we're still able to answer questions about the Greiny-Groller's Grandled in the Granchy Gack. We can still answer some questions. Can you tell me what kind of growlers were they? Yes, we can. We know that they're griny. What did the growlers do? Well, they grandled. Where did they do it? In the Granchy Gack. And in what kind of gack did they grandle? Well, it was Granchy. And the thing about rigor is that rigor challenges students' thinking in new and interesting ways. Even though I don't know what these words mean, we can determine how the words fit together and what the relationships are, and at least get an idea of what the structure is, even though we don't know the actual definitions of these words. So when you think of rigor as the result of the learning and not necessarily just the cause of the learning. It's that ability to think and process at higher levels. So when we talk about rigor, we are working on establishing a common language. Rigor is all about thinking. It's about scaffolding the thinking. It's about planning for the thinking that our students are going to do. It's about assessing students' thinking about the content, recognizing the levels of thinking that students demonstrate, and managing the teaching and learning level to get our students to that desired thinking level. Rigor is not about having more or harder worksheets. It's not a higher level book in reading. It's not more work. It's not homework. It's really about the level of thinking that students are able to do and what they are trying to do. Some common misconceptions of rigor. A lot of times we think that to have rigorous thinking, we have to master the basics first. That's not necessarily true. Any level of learning can be rigorous. It's really about designing the thinking for that learning experience. Sometimes we think that rigor is only for the elite students or the pre-AP students. Again, that's doing a disservice to all of our students. We really want to make sure that we are providing rigorous thinking opportunities for all of our students because they are going to need that capability in order to meet the demands of 21st century jobs as in 22nd century jobs as our students, get older. Some ideas for rigor. Rigorous lessons and tasks ask students to do things like examine, to classify, to generate, create, scrutinize, produce, deduce, assess, prioritize, decide. Really, all those verbs that we think about when we look at Bloom's and we think about moving up onto higher level thinking skills. So when we are talking about designing this first lesson, you're going to want to refer to the Bloom's Taxonomy teacher planning chart that is in your red folder. And we'll also be talking about the lesson reflection sheet. And again, remember, it's all about being intentional and designing those lessons so that students are thinking at the levels that you want them to be at. Finally, we'll be looking at the rigor relevance framework. This talks about rigor as far as Bloom's taxonomy and the level of thinking. And then eventually we'll include this to the relevance piece and how students can move throughout these 4 quadrants in their thinking and in their learning. All right, that's all we have for today. I look forward to working with you on planning this first lesson. Thank you.